all of which go to the winner of the state, would actually make Rutherford B. Hayes the Republican candidate president. In all three of those states, you also have Republican governors who have just lost, but are still the people who have to certify the election. All three states say that Hayes won, even though it's very close and disputed. So Hayes has one more electoral vote. Of course, the Democrats don't accept that. And so we go into February. The inauguration was done in March, not in January. We go from November to February without clear agreement on who the president is. In the end, there's an agreement that they come to a deal, which is where the Democrats will accept Hayes as president in return for Hayes doing all the things the Democrats want in the South. And so in essence, you have a deal made that one side will get all it wants while allowing the other side to have the figurehead. And so in a certain way, this marks a moment when the Confederacy wins. For example, Hayes has to agree to pull out all federal force from the South, which means there's no protection for fair elections going forward. And you'll see in states like Mississippi, the number of African-American voters will decline and not recover again until the late 20th century. So that's what that election does. And from 1876 until 1896, we have a series of elections that are very close. It happens also in 1888 that the person with the most popular vote loses. That's Grover Cleveland, who loses to Benjamin Harrison. And again, we'll have the same issue where there's a dispute. And so what that election shows us, 1876, 1888, is that our election system and the problem of having an electoral college really complicates things. It makes it harder for us to come to any kind of consensus, any kind of agreement on who's won an election. Super important for today, because most of the 20th century, we don't have close elections, so it doesn't matter. When we come to a world today where our elections are very close, our system is not well designed to deal with those issues.
Do you draw any parallels with our time, and what are some key differences? There's been contested elections, Florida, with Al Gore, and there's been just contested election after contested election, and of course, most famously recently, with the contested election that led to January 6th.
So I think a couple of parallels and a couple of differences. One parallel is that when you have close elections, the losing side's never happy. It's a myth that when you have a close election, the other side just accepts it, and it's not. That doesn't happen. And we need to be attentive to that and ready for that. January 6th actually should surprise us, not because it happened, but because it hadn't happened before. People who lose a close election are never happy, and they always think that something has been done. That's one parallel. Second parallel is elections are violent. We have this myth that our elections are peaceful. No, there's always violence involved in one way or another. Violence in either trying to prevent people from voting or violence in preventing people from voting, right? Yeah. Elections are not peaceful walks in the park. And that's why most countries have a centralized system to manage elections and provide protection for people. We need to think about that. A lot of people don't vote because they're afraid. They don't want to take the time, but they're also afraid that they're going to anger someone or that they're going to be seen as politicizing an issue. Differences. In 1876, there was fraud in the election. There were people who voted 2-3 times. One of the things the Ku Klux Klan did is it prevented black people from voting, and then it helped white people go to multiple voting booths. And this was quite common. In the 1880s, if you went to vote, here's how it would happen in a place like Chicago or New York. The union boss from your factory would come and get you at the factory, give you lunch, get you drunk, and then drive you from one voting booth to another and give you a ballot that you would bring in and he would watch you deposit that ballot.
Sounds pretty nice, not going to lie. I'd take that ride.
So that's a difference. That is not how our elections work now. One of our great accomplishments has been to eliminate virtually all the fraud in our elections. How have we done that? By creating safeguards. It is very difficult. All the evidence we have is that the minimal fraud that's occurred in elections are onesies and twosies, and it's never in the last 20 years had any big difference in the outcome of elections. So that's a big difference. And then another big difference, I think, is that in that time, the Democrats and Republicans are on the opposite sides of where they are now, and that changes everything, right? So the Democrats then are the party of the Confederacy. The Democrats are the party of exclusion. The Republicans are more the party of economic expansion. And the Republicans are the Big Ten party. We're reversed today.
Do you think because there's much less election fraud now, like you described. One of the lessons we want to maybe learn from that is there doesn't actually have to be election fraud for either side to claim there's election fraud. Yeah. It seems like it's more and more common. And it seems to me that in 2024 election in the United States, if a Republican wins, there would also be just as likely as if a Democrat wins, that there would be nuanced claims of election fraud because it's become more and more normalized.
I think what this history shows is that our election system makes it easy for people to claim fraud because it's so unnecessarily complex. First of all, we don't have a system where the person who gets the most votes is necessarily the winner. So that already creates one problem. Second problem is everything, I talk about this in the book, is controlled at the county level. So what happens with Hayes and Tilden in 1876 is you have one county official who says they think one person won, another county official says the other person won. There's no centralized system. It would be as if we allowed every airport to control safety in airplanes. Our airplanes would not be safe. Our airplanes are safe because the FAA and the National Transportation Safety Board have strict universal guidelines for what makes for a safe plane, and therefore our planes generally don't fall out of the sky. Our system is very complex. It has complex rules and has too many people who have authority in too many different places. Complexity makes it easier for someone to make an argument that the wrong thing has been done. We should simplify the system. In Brazil, they had a very close election, and it's very hard for Bolsonaro, who lost that close election, to claim there was fraud because there's a central authority run by the judiciary that counted the votes, and it's just simple. It's not about which states. It's not about who the county officials were.
Did he claim or no?
He has not acknowledged that he lost.
Right. So to push back on your on your statement, I'm undefeated in Monopoly and Risk because anytime I lose, I walk away claiming there was fraud and cheating involved, and I refuse to believe otherwise. I just think that accusations of fraud is a narrative that's disjoint from the reality of whether there was or not fraud.
Yeah, I agree. But I think we make it a little easier for that narrative by having a complex, convoluted system.
And I wonder if there's other improvements that take us into the 21st century that allow for electronic voting. There's all kinds of improvements that it seems our system is dragging their feet on. Ranked choice voting, all that kind of stuff.
Let's make this clear. We claim to be the greatest 21st century democracy, and we still vote like the 19th century. We're not even in the 20th century. Most people, when they went to vote, they actually checked a box and put a piece of paper in a box, right? I mean, that's not 21st century. We can move millions of dollars, maybe billions for you, Lex, in bank accounts from our keyboard.
Thank you.
From our keyboards.
Billions of rubles.
Billions of pennies.
Pennies.
Why can we move money safely and not vote in the same ways?
Yeah. And at the same time, so there's security there in the movement of money, and then there's the actual engagement. Most of us, depending on your age demographic, click like on Facebook or Twitter or TikTok tens of thousands of times a year. I think this kind of mechanism of constantly, and a like is a vote.
Yeah.
So you're constantly voting. We love voting. We love giving our opinion on that stuff. It just seems obvious that gamifying the system, which is essentially what the election is, making it fun to be engaged in different issues. And there's also be a case. Now I don't understand these things deeply, but it always seemed to me that issue-based voting should be the future. It seems like too complicated to vote for singular people versus on ideas, which, on Twitter, we don't necessarily vote for people. We vote for ideas. If you like a tweet or not, you like it, and so on. That too seems to be like a possibility for improvement.
Well, there's certainly a way to improve polling. We could measure public opinion better. Yes. We still poll as if we're in the early 20th century. They still actually call people. It's amazing to me. I was talking to one pollster. They will call 100 people and get one person, but they still do that. That
probably still call landlines, right?
Well, they try to get cell phones too, but they do call landlines. But one could create a system that would be far better in the way you're describing, it seems to me, Lex, to actually assess what people like and don't like.
So your book, your work in general, your perspective on history is, I would say, at least from my perspective, nonpartisan.
Thank you.
Yeah, you do exceptionally good job with that, despite the attacks and the criticisms. That said, you personally, just the way you speak, my judgment, and you can push back on this, I think you lean left in your politics.